cherry garden. Yo, equal rights under the law. You hear? Equal rights under the law. My youth, remember the rights of the children. It's unlawful not to educate them. Don't ever do nothing to hurt them. Protect them from crime and violence. Justice, justice for all.
Welcome to Let's Talk Justice. Today is Tuesday, April 4th. And of course, we just want to start out with our usual gratitude to those who keep tuning in to our program, Let's Talk Justice. So thank you again. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice.
And I'm Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist at Jamaicans for Justice.
Now, we're going to be discussing the roadmap towards constitutional reform. And can I tell you...
Michael, you're already grinning.
No, you must understand, if you've watched certain documentary, and when Jamaica gained its independence in 1962, there was a jubilee moment. Mm-hmm. And can I tell you, the moment we get rid of the monarchy is the day I think I will be absolutely crying. It will have that... My son thinks I'm absolutely weird, but it's fine. I will own it. I think it's going to be a proud moment for us to say that we're
close
truly...
to your ancestral liberation.
Absolutely. I think it's something that really focuses on human dignity given our past of enslavement by the United Kingdom. Yes?
Yes, I agree. The symbolism of it cannot be understated.
But it's beyond symbolism, though, because, you know... There was a staff member of JFJ that whenever we're putting out our position paper, we'll always say executive overreach. Because one of the conversations to be had at some point today is really understanding the governance structure and the concept of separation of powers and the real independence that is needed when you look at our, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary branch, and what that really all means when it comes to government accountability. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion today, Jade. We're looking forward. I hope I'm speaking for you when I say we are looking forward to having this discussion.
Yes, for sure. Maybe not quite as enthusiastic as you, but definitely looking forward to it, yes.
And we're going to be joined by Mr. Matondo Mkulu. He's a barrister and former office public defender, I recall. And we're also going to be joined by Dr. Nadine Spence, who is also a member of the recently formed Constitutional Reform Committee. We should have been joined by Gordon Robinson, someone I was hoping to really have that conversation with. And I tell you, if Mr. Robinson can make it out of court, I would really appreciate Mr. Robinson's views, because I follow him on Twitter at Terrible Tout, I believe. So he's quite engaging. So I'm looking forward to that discussion in short order. But before we start the program, Jade, usually we start out with our human rights recap of the week. And we've had several issues. One of them, I hope you can indulge me with talking towards the end of the program. Because I think at the start of the program, when we have things to celebrate, we must celebrate it.
Okay.
Yes?
Sure.
So, for those who went to Champs, my son attends a particular school, I won't name it. But that young man, he got the freedom of going to Champs on Saturday. And he said, Mommy, I was rooting for Kingston College. And I said, your school should revoke your membership. Because I can't imagine how you went to Champs at a particular high school and you went here to cheer for KC. But certainly, congratulations, it's in order for Kingston College, who won for the 34th time the boys' championship. And Heidel, the young girls actually, who worked hard in securing for the first time the trophy for the girls' part of championship. And that is something that's commendable to Corey Bennett in particular as the coach. So Champs and all of our youngsters, it was something I was watching on Twitter. I'm not a sports fan, so I wasn't as enthused. But I really say, when you look at the importance of sports and the opportunities that it gives our youngsters, scholarships and so on, and, there is the view that sports brings us together, So I really want to congratulate our youngsters. But there's another story, Jade, and it focuses on how corporate sponsorship and us coming together when needed plays a critical role in society. So for those who don't remember, young Adriana Ling, She's a teenager who over 90% of her body was severely burnt in a fire.
Yes.
And 3 of her brothers succumbed to death,
Yes.
unfortunately. Young Adriana was provided with support to go overseas and do her surgery. She indicated that her wish was to go to Champs and meet some of her idols. And apparently Minister Grange, Olivia Babsy Grange, made that wish come true. And, we have to say thank you, Minister. But young Adriana, if you look at some of those videos, she was greeted by Shelley and Price, which we all know and love. She was also greeted by Asafa Powell, which we also know and love, as well as USAID Ambassador Ambassador Perry, and other dignitaries greeted her. I believe there was public recognition of young Adriana, and it was just a beautiful moment to witness, I believe. And she was all grins and smiles and all of that type of exciting feeling. And by the way, she was right at the track. Really feeling the energies of it all. So that is something I think it's really worth considering, because this is one of the things when there is time of crisis and tragedy for people, you've seen and witnessed where people come together to support. And I think that is something worth recognizing, because what it suggests is that as Jamaicans, we can do so much and be so much more if we really put our collective energies towards the betterment of the country. That's what I took away from those 2 elements that we highlighted earlier. All the negatives we'll talk at the end of the program.
Okay, all right. Well, yes, I agree, and I'm glad to see that Adriana is recovering well.
Yes.
And recovering well enough to be at Champs in all of the excitement. So
Yeah.
So we'll go straight into our human rights of the week. Here we go. Right, so our Did You Know for this week is about how we are able to amend our constitution. One of your favorite subjects, Mikhail. But also in line with our discussion today. So for those who don't know, in our constitution, we would have 2 kinds of provisions that require special amendment, and those are specially entrenched provisions and entrenched provisions. So entrenched provisions are those that are amended with a 2/3 majority. However, specially entrenched provisions have to also have a referendum, and if the Senate refuses to pass the bill, then it has to be twice sent to the House of Representatives, and then may be put before the voters again at referendum. So that is some of the process in which the Constitution can be changed. So when we hear, for example, Mikhail, we did an episode about the saving law clause.
That the government secured when they amended the charter in 2011.
So I asked, what kind of provision was that, Mikhail? Specially entrenched or entrenched?
The charter?
Yes.
It's an entrenched provision.
And so that would require what?
2/3 majority.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, you're putting me in the test spot?
Yes,
My
absolutely.
God, can you imagine if my politics students were watching and I got anything incorrect?
Yes,
I need to sharpen my skills today, you see, and puff up and carry on with excitement.
Have to give them a little something just in case to catch Miss Jackson. Okay, and we also have for this week our trivia question. So our question is to give one provision that is entrenched and one provision that is specially entrenched. So Mikhail gave you one that is entrenched, that is the Charter of Rights. So you can now give us another that is entrenched and one that is specially entrenched. And you can give us your answer on our social media pages at Jamaicans for Justice, JA for Justice on Instagram.
All right, so the topic that we're discussing is really the roadmap towards constitutional reform in the country. So for those who were watching the news and paying attention to what was happening, our former Attorney General, the Honorable Marlene Mallohu Fort, she was given the post of Minister in the newly established ministry in January 2022 as the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. And that particular ministry was charged with the responsibility of reviewing our constitution that we have and ensuring that we create this roadmap in a participatory manner, very consultative. And in March of 2023, just last month, we heard the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Michael Holness indicating that these are the committee members that will really provide oversight and directive in the process towards constitutional reform, with a particular focus being placed on removing the monarchy, the God bless the king language that we all need to get rid of quickly.
Yes, so the committee is comprised of, the committee is comprised of quite a few members, including the minister herself and Ambassador Rocky Mead, who are co-chairs of the committee. It is also staffed by the Attorney General, Dr. Derek McCoy, the Senate President, Tom Tavares Finson, Mr. Ransford Braham, the Opposition Senator, Donna Scott Motley, and Member of Parliament, Andrew Hilton. An international consultant also makes up some of the body, Professor Richard Albert, and a constitutional expert who we would have engaged on our show prior. So if you want to go back and look at those episodes, but we would have had Dr. Lloyd Barnett on our show in previous time. We also have Dr. David Henry, and from civil society we have Dr. Nadine Spence, Miss Lalitia Davis Mattis, and youth advisor Sir J. Boswell.
Now, I think we have people who are qualified in my estimation, but one of the conversations that have emerged, when you listen to the names, we have 11 of 14 members who are attorneys. There are conversations that have also emerged about whether or not the minister should be a co-chair. And JFJ, we have also raised our concerns around the presence of Ambassador Rocky Mead. But there are other things being discussed. And I tell you, I follow Mr. Robinson, and one of the things he has raised personally on his Twitter account, and I hope he will be here with us to ventilate, what do we really call becoming a republic? Yes? Is it just getting rid of the monarchy, or is it looking at the structure of our governance? What you've heard me criticize before, that our executive branch basically renders the legislator impotent in their ability to really carry out the function. So should we have that sort of separation of powers? There would have also been conversations about what institutions ought to be entrenched. Some of them have been long promised. The Electoral Commission of Jamaica, for example, is something that really needs constitutional protection. The Office of the Political Ombudsman, which the government, by way of its executive directive, got rid of without going to Parliament, which we find very problematic, as well as the Office of the Public Defender is an interim act. But JFJ, we have written several policy papers which indicate that the Office of the Public Defender should be strengthened to become the national human rights institution, which is basically a collegial approach, similar to what we have with the Integrity Commission. And that NHRI should be secured in the Constitution. And you've heard us publicly stating that the Integrity Commission, when you look at, for example, Minister Warmington's attempt to weaken that commission, you see the importance that we don't want simple majority to be able to just pass away and do away with legislative provisions, but really entrenchment is the way to go for key accountable institutions. So a mouthful was just said.
Yes.
But we're going to be breaking it down when we return after the break, and we're going to be joined by several noted individuals who can speak more on the matter.
The future of advertising to the diaspora and Caribbean markets resides only on the bridge. Get on now. 876-669-5000.
Chasing purpose is a journey of self-love, self-development, healing, and spirituality.
When you feel like giving up,
Our talk show aims to empower, inspire, and uplift through thought-provoking conversations. Guided by our 4 pillars: nurturing faith, setting intentions, pursuing aspirations, all while we are living boldly.
every time I feel can't do no different. Swear me out for when.
Won't you join us Wednesday, 10 a.m. to midday for Chasing Purpose, where we sow seeds others will benefit
That's
from.
why I'ma try again.
Rights we should all know.
If any member of the security force hits you, abuses you, refuses to give you your phone call, or otherwise violates your rights, complain to the police on duty, the JP who visits the lockup, the public defender, the inspectorate of constabulary, or the police at the station. With every right, there is a responsibility.
Brought to you by the Office of the Public Defender.
One Jamaica, looking at the bigger picture.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Just reminding those persons who are listening, thank you again so much, but you can call our studio line at 676-4996 and you can WhatsApp us your views at 239-7583. We're discussing the matter of constitutional reform in the country, really what that roadmap should look like, what the agenda should look like, and who are the best persons and institutions really to be guiding that process going forward. And we are joined by Mr. Matondo Makulu, who is a barrister, the equivalent to an attorney here. Is Mr. Gordon Robinson with us? And we're also joined by Dr. Nadine Spence. Dr. Spence is with us. And Dr. Spence is a gender development specialist, and she is also a representative of the civil society on the Constitutional Reform Committee. Welcome to you both for joining the program.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Ms. Spence.
Good afternoon as well, Mr. Matondo.
All right, Mr. Matondo, let me start with you because we actually we were together on another program, and you've heard some of the comments that we have, and you know there is respectful disagreement on some matters. But let me start with you by you just indicating to us what is your initial reaction to the structure of the committee and perhaps the TOR if you've had a chance to read through.
Is it the structure? You mean the membership?
The membership, yes.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have the president of the Senate on it. It's not in keeping with my understanding of good governance, because the president of the Senate will obviously have to go back into the Senate to then regulate affairs. And so I don't think, and this is not any personal reflection or attack on the current president of the Senate. I don't think that should be there. There are notable persons there who I think will bring sufficient experience in terms of their ability and experience in dealing with constitutional affairs. I suspect the names that come to mind: Dr. Barnett, Hugh Small, Professor Albert. I've read some of his stuff since he's been announced, and yes, he has a contribution to make, but I still think that the chair of this committee ought to have been a law professor from the Caribbean. It's a bit obvious why, but if it needs to be restated, I find from my little journey on earth that when it comes to constitutional issues, and especially in the Caribbean jurisdiction, you find that the law professors tend to engage more often than some of the practitioners with the constitutional issues. And so I'd want a law professor to chair the committee. Certainly not a minister who has set up the committee. That there's nothing. it's as if you've set up a committee, and then you want to literally be there to ensure that it comes and does produce a particular outcome.
Rather than the reporting process
Yeah.
to the minister.
Yeah. I certainly take the view, which seems to be the popular view, that as many attributes that Mr. Rocky Mead has, I don't see him as the correct fit to chair this committee. Is not. I would also have, if you like, a sort of a sort of vacant position on the chair, where I take in experts as opposed to having a so that you can get a view of an expert on one particular issue.
Perhaps in keeping with the phases you're speaking?
Well, yes, even so. And up until I was told that and I'm an honest person, that Miss Dr. Spence was a gender specialist, I was one who never understood her presence on the panel, on the committee. But having regard to the fact that she's a gender specialist, yes, I can see the importance of having that perspective on as part of the committee, so that the issue of gender issues are not sidelined as we go about reforming our constitution. In terms of the terms of reference, I think the timeline, for example, the phase 1, 2 months. I know why they have indicated 2 months and what's influencing it. It's really, in a nutshell, the fact that the two political parties seem to have agreed that they want a Westminster style replacement of the constitutional monarchy. And so we're going to replace the constitutional monarchy, but at the same time we're saying, well, we've all agreed, as in the political parties have agreed, that this will be replaced by not an executive president, but a ceremonial president. And I personally just don't think that 1 to 2 months is sufficient. And secondly, the people of Jamaica have not really had an opportunity to think about the choice between a ceremonial presidency and an executive presidency, what that means in terms of really reshaping our governance structure. There's a lot to be said about an executive president who can, for example, looking at what obtains in Guyana, who can select members to be part of a cabinet, not necessarily persons who would have competed and won a seat in the House of Representatives or their National Assembly.
Let us pause on that for a second, Mr. Makulu, because I want us to go through, because there may have been areas of consensus in the past, but I think as the Jamaican people become a little bit more educated and informed on the process, we're not all in keeping with that non-executive ceremonial president. So I want us to probe that. But Dr. Spence, congratulations on your appointment, gender development specialist and representing the civil society. Can you just explain to us what the phases mean and what we can expect? I think the committee has met, you can guide us, I think 2 times, but you can correct us. What were some of those discussions like? Whatever you can share.
Okay, thanks for the invitation. Yes, the phases, as you would have referred to, the first phase is about dealing with those. And let me read from the TORs, the matters within the constitutions that are considered deeply entrenched. That is, those matters for which, having deliberated and gone to the Parliament and to, including the Senate, the people would vote through a referendum. So that's the first phase of the discussions that the Constitutional Reform Committee is currently engaged in. And then the second, and that includes matters related to repatriation or patriation of the Constitution of Jamaica, abolition of the constitutional monarchy, establishment of the Republic of Jamaica, and all matters within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which a referendum is required to amend. So that's the first phase. The second phase is looking at wordings and provisions of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom set out in Chapter 3 and the other ordinarily entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which amendments are desired and required. And the third phase is full assessment of the nation state's legal and constitutional infrastructure to facilitate putting together a new constitution of Jamaica. So as per our terms of reference, that is what the phases look like. We have met twice. The first was just the committee coming together, being introduced to the terms of reference, initial conversations as to what the expectations are of the members, but also hearing from the Prime Minister, who had brief remarks to make as to what the government's expectations are. And we've also been talking about, because you would know that a lot of work has gone into discussing constitutional reform in Jamaica. It's not a process that is beginning now.
No, and I want to plug, Nadine, to the listeners that you do have the 1995 report. It makes a very good reading. It's on the Jambar's website, actually, and you have the recommendation report later on that was reviewing specifically the charter at that time and the unfinished business. And dare I say, there is a report from the Caribbean vulnerable communities called Unfinished Business that we can share here at JFJ, but it should be online. Just want to advise the listeners, Nadine. Sorry.
Right. So it's important for Jamaicans to understand that there is detailed work that has gone into this matter. And if, becoming myself very familiar, I can show you the document that has been prepared. I'm going to show you because it's not an easy document. I'm reading it every day. This is the document that we are as members.
Oh, you're going back to school?
Literally going back to school. We're looking at we're looking at the process, the constitutional reform process in Barbados. We're looking at the Dominican Constitution. We're looking at constitutions in different places across the world. Those reports that we have seen before from our reform processes in Jamaica. And just, writings on constitutional reform and as always, the encouragement for us to continue to read and to see what has happened in other parts of the world.
Dr. Spence, we're going to pick up with you. Mr. Makula, please stay with us. We're going to take the break. We're behind.
Okay.
We still a do it big, big, big. KFC still a do it big. KFC big deal. The time by KFC big deal is
29 minutes going up to 2 o'clock.
I put it down on the wrong one.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Sex.
On the bridge?
Every Tuesday at 10 p.m.
We talk about the forbidden, then inevitable, the truth. Nothing is untouched. It's live with me, dancehall queen Carlene.
Download the Bridge app, be on the 99, and tune in this Tuesday after dark.
The conversation is intellectual and maybe tantric, but always entertaining as we hear from the expert and you.
SOD, this Tuesday at 10 p.m.
If you want to do a test, come to Jassel, we're the best. HIV and syphilis test. If you want to do a test, come to Jassel, we're the best. HIV and syphilis test.
To get tested today, contact Jamaica AIDS Support for Life at 876-925-0021. A message from the Jamaica AIDS Support for Life with the kind support of USAID from the American people.
KFC, we still a do it big, big, big. KFC. Work hard every day with determination. Anything you set your mind to, you do it big. No underestimate your potential. You are a real big deal and you must win. SPIC in your area. KFC with the taste and the flavor. We are big deals, so adapt we are hard and we do big things. We know
KFC still a do it big. KFC big big deal. Enjoy 3 pieces of delicious chicken, fries, and a Pepsi because big dreamers need a big deal.
It's Jamaican, it's Caribbean, to the world! On the Bridge 99 FM, you heard?
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. Today we're discussing the Constitutional Reform Committee, and we are joined by Barrister Matundo Makulo and Dr. Nadine Spence, who is a member of the committee. Dr. Spence, I just wanted to pick up with you on your role on the committee. So you're a gender specialist.
And we know what that means.
Yes, we know what that means in the NGO space. But for our listeners and our fellow Jamaicans, what would your role in particular look like on the committee?
Well, one of the things that I think accompanies one who is labeled gender specialist, and I have I guess it's more than labeling. I like this. When I was asked at the committee, what is it that I think I could bring? What I talked about is this matter of citizenship and who counts and who gets regarded as a citizen, and who, when we talk about citizens' rights, which citizens are included and which ones are excluded, and to look at how the full gamut of rights that we speak about as it relates to this matter of the Constitution and who it speaks to, how different people need to be looked after, given regard for when we construct a constitution which details people's rights. So that's how I see it. I'm concerned with the matter of citizenship and the quality of citizenship. I'm also concerned with the matter of democracy and how democracy is executed such that all of those who are expected to be beneficiaries of the democratic process are able to share in the goods of democracy, in its deliverables.
So perhaps looking more with some more direct approach, participatory approach going forward.
Exactly. I also chair the Public Engagement and Communications Committee, and that is, I'm literally sitting at my desk working out, how are we proceeding as it relates to ensuring that the public is involved, that civil society organization, the voice of civil society is heard, that citizens who want to speak to the commission can speak to the committee, that it's not limited to Kingston, that we take it, the committee on the road, that different age group of people can speak to it, people with different abilities can also have a say, that as long as a Jamaican wants to say something, there's an avenue for them to express it. That's also one of the responsibilities that I have. Perfect. And I am sitting down now, working it out, making sure that those people who have articulated a perspective get the opportunity to be heard, and those people who perhaps don't know that they have a perspective yet are informed enough so that they begin to develop a perspective and perhaps get the opportunity to be heard.
Great. So I have to ask, as we would agree that the public education around this issue is extremely necessary, but contrasting the timeline for phase 1 with those plans for public education, at what point would they fit in that 2-month period?
Well, I've been just yesterday I had a conversation, and Sunday we met as a public education engagement and communication committee. Just Sunday we met and we did some deliberation. Yesterday I spoke with the permanent secretary and the co-chair about what are some of the resources that are going to be needed and how we go about pulling things together and moving through. Some things are already happening, and we expect that we are going to be really very active. Just now, we have I'm putting together a list of things that we are going to put out there in the public so that people can start sharing their ideas and opinion on social media, to an email address and so on. So we are currently working on ensuring that Jamaicans from all walks of life can get an opportunity to speak, to be heard, or hear from the committee. Now, I don't necessarily have the power to decide on the timeline just yet. We are navigating what realities we are given right now. But we are also making sure that Jamaicans get the opportunity to be engaged as fully and as thoroughly as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Makulu, still with us?
Yes, I am.
On the matter of the president, I just want to pick up on that conversation because it's a sticking point. There was a tweet that was made by one of the members recently that the committee has reached a consensus on the removal of the monarchy. And while there was some consensus in that report in the past, you heard Dr. Spence outlining the participatory process that is being proposed. But my question is it a tad bit too late for the first phase? Or is it more public education on what has been decided? And should the public have a say in the type of president that we want? And if you can outline to us what are some of the powers, the reserve powers, as you may call it, that we would want perhaps a president to have going forward?
Well, I mean, and that's a problem with what has been outlined. Mm-hmm. There's this assumption that has been made by the minister that the position of the political parties somehow reflects the position that the country has, when no one has really asked anyone in the country if they want a executive presidency, and two, do you understand what an executive presidency means? We have to understand that everybody, most persons, I say everybody, understands what a ceremonial presidency, if you like, means, because we've always had effectively one, and what is being planned now is to replace one for the other. The educational or public awareness part of this committee should have taken place long time before an announcement has been made that it will take 2 months for us to get through that phase. That to me is literally putting the cart before the horse. Before you decide how long this will take, why not test and see where the country is and what information it has, and our understanding of the of what it means. For example, you talk about the reserve powers. Depending on which model you look at, one of the for the executive president, what was certainly discussed in 1995 was the idea, and this was the preferred option of the People's National Party at the time, when you read the records, was a president that had the power to select some persons to be members of the cabinet outside of the usual suspects, those who would have competed in an election.
The political appointees, if you will.
Yeah. And I personally think that is always a good option, because you have persons who do not wish to be associated with any political party, but they could certainly be a good member of cabinet.
As well as the Senate. I think the president was proposed for, at least 2 members of the Senate, moving on up to 36?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some will say, well, we already have an option to bring others who are, say, non-political, bring them through the Senate. But we acknowledge that presently our Constitution says, well, effectively, the Minister of Finance has to sit in the House of Representatives. And one of the things that you also get from having an executive president who can appoint, if you like, ministers outside of the political fray is you start to strengthen the role that Parliament plays. Because not everyone now who sits on the government side will find this also needed because I'm in cabinet. I must toe the political line, even if it doesn't mean the good. A recent example of that is when the current government took the mind-boggling decision to cancel or postpone, depending on what terminology you want to use, the local government election. And everyone on the government side, irrespective of how silly the reason, I don't have any other adjective to describe, silly the reasons postponing sounded, everyone on that side stood up and voted for a postponement that all of us who are all the citizens could see. This didn't make any sense. Yeah. When you have a governance structure that does not give the executive or the cabinet that awesome power in Parliament now suddenly, hopefully, becomes a body that will keep the executive in check. Because that was always the original intention.
The design. But right now we have the decisions made at the cabinet, then you go to Parliament and it's a rubber stamping at both the lower and the upper house.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you see, and that is why, that's a problem I have with this committee now. It is not, certainly at phase one, it is not one that will bring home a reform of the executive power in a radical way. They're literally following the Barbados model. And that's a disappointment. It is a disappointment.
Yes. Dr. Spence, you've heard Mr. Makulu mention, and it's a position that we share, a concern actually. Because when you listen to people, Jade, and we would have been monitoring Twitter and the other social media, people have indicated that if I'm just getting a ceremonial president, my taxpayer money won't be going towards that. So we might as well keep the GG. So I'll be voting no in a referendum. So, Dr. Spence, I'm not sure, and I don't want to put you in a position of speaking perhaps on matters that you can't, but you can guide us through, certainly. I'm not sure where you stand. I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, where perhaps some advocacy at the committee level could be had, that perhaps that timeline would need shifting. Because when we look at other models of constitutional reform, you see where you felt the pulse of the people, what their current knowledge entails, what they would want, before you fully launch that public education, or perhaps the public education would have been launched before we decide that a bill will be tabled in 2 months' time. I'm not sure where your personal position stands on that particular matter, if you can say so.
I think that, if you'll allow me, I'll say this, that invariably what is going to happen in this first phase of the reform process is that Jamaicans are going to decide one way or the other. Whether or not they agree, because a referendum is going to be the Jamaicans speaking to that, right?
Yeah, but Nadine, I want to be able to cry to say we get rid of the monarchy, so I don't want to set us up for failure, if you will.
No, but
I'm saying that in any case, the Jamaican people are going to vote. So I think whether or not that process is engaged sufficiently so that they know what it is specifically they're voting for, they're speaking to, is going to be critical to the committee's work, right? Because if that conversation is not had in a way that has as much people engaged in it and are clear on what the paths are, then we are likely to see a particular kind of outcome that we might not want. So my point is, whether we like it or not, the Jamaican people are going to speak. And whether or not we want to have a constitutional monarchy or we want to be a republic, is that this process of engaging people and talking to people about what the reform process is and listening to Jamaicans and ensuring that the perspectives of the people are represented in the deliberations is critical to that outcome. I don't think it's something that you, given the way this part of the deliberations are arranged and how they will be resolved, it's not a surprise you can spring on people. You know? So that's
but if you give persons a false choice, you're gonna have a result, I think, that you're gonna force people to vote. For example, say the majority votes, no, we're gonna keep the constitutional monarchy. Not because we want it or we're in love with it, but because the options that you're giving us are not real. We might as well keep what we have, because what you're presenting to us
I wouldn't say false choice are not real.
It is a false choice.
What you would say, Dr. Spence?
We have different perspectives on the kinds of presidents that could emerge out of it. Some people might agree with one, some people might not. I'm not here putting forward my personal perspective. I'm not saying that we can't begin the conversation by saying if you believe in a ceremonial presence and your choice is false. I'm just saying those of us who are engaged in this process have a responsibility to articulate clearly to Jamaicans what the choices are, or else we might not necessarily see the result that we want. That's everything I'm saying.
People need to be.
And I'm also saying choosing one.
Mr. Makulo. Yes, go ahead, Nadine.
We have different perspectives. People have different perspectives on it, and we can't begin the process by saying if you choose one side, then you're false and wrong. We have to be willing to listen and engage each other.
No.
So, Mr.
Makulo.
Yes. Yes, I wanted Nadine to finish her thought, Mr. Makulo, and then you jump in. I think we're up on a break. I don't know if the producer could allow me one more minute to finish off this convo, and then we go to the break. Nadine, yes, finish, please.
For me, the matter at hand is to, exactly what you said. Jamaicans need to know what are the options before us, and how do we get those perspectives to be so saturated within the population so that people can say, okay, I get what you mean. I get what this means. I get what comes with that. And okay, I agree. Right now, I don't think a large cross-section of Jamaican will understand.
I think that's the challenge we're having, though, yes. Nadine, which is what Mr. Makulo is pointing to, because we share those concerns, yeah.
So I'm saying that if it is that we do not spend the time to get people to understand and to be as engaged as possible in that conversation, we might not see the results that we want.
Okay.
So it's the detriment of the committee to not engage Jamaicans in a conversation about what the choices they're going to make are.
All right, perfectly said. Thank you. Mr. Makulo, last word, and then we close out.
This is a well-intentioned review process, but one that will not yield as good a result as it could have achieved. It has been done in haste to satisfy political ends, and I hope as the process unfolds, the first phase, that good sense will prevail, and then we start discussing what republicanism really means.
Which includes electoral reform, which is something I think,
And I agree with what you say in terms of getting the other institutions entrenched in the Constitution, the very ones that you've mentioned. But phase one is frankly doomed to fail, and I'm not trying to be a doomsday preacher. It is doomed to fail because our people are not sufficiently informed, and you cannot undertake such an important reform in 2 months. It's nonsensical.
All right, thank you so much. That was Matondo Makulo, barrister, aka attorney at law, and he was well represented in Jamaica before he took leave. And Dr. Nadine Spence, a friend of JFJ's, gender development specialist and member on the Constitutional Reform Committee. Thanks to you both for joining us. We take the break.
Hi, I'm Ronald Thwaites, and I'm the host of The Public Eye and The Open Mind on the Bridge 99 and Irie Jam in the tri-state area. This program will tell you the truth about life backyard. Fair, open talk. No gossip, no slander. We want to listen to your concerns. Also want to help you with your problems in JA. We at the Bridge rate you and affirm our oneness as citizens of this blessed land we love. So join us now on Wednesdays on the Bridge, crossing the waters, linking Jamaicans and Jamaican lovers everywhere.
Imagine your advertising dollar reaching your Caribbean and diaspora target beyond borders in a single rotation. It happens only on the Bridge. Call now to advertise 876-669-5000.
Paris International Events presents Regina Bell live in concert at Hope Gardens in Kingston, Saturday, May 6th. See performances by Marcia Griffiths, Glenn Washington, George Nooks, and the Public Alert Band. Get tickets online at firstinlineja.com. Cocktails at 6 to 7 p.m. Showtime 8 p.m. That's Regina Bell at Palm Drive in Hope Gardens, Saturday, May 6th. Call 876-426-8773.
One love, one art, one Jamaica. On the Bridge 99 FM.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice. Justice for all. Justice.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We just had a very interesting discussion with Mr. Matunda Makulu and Dr. Nadine Spence on our recently appointed Constitutional Reform Committee. I do have quite a few public views from our IG pages. Also, one of these comments is in relation to the interview that was happening with both persons. So this first one from Nico, I'm not going to try to do the entire IG handle, but from Nico, in response to, do we think there's enough public education going on around the constitutional reform process? And he says, what is constitutional reform? The government of Jamaica has always treated the citizens with intellectual contempt and has manufactured consent using various tactics such as limited, I think he wants to say information. The question is almost redundant as the government clearly has not even begun to educate Jamaicans on this constitutional reform, quote unquote. A democratic republic is no different than the sham constitutional democracy that we currently have. What Jamaica needs to embrace is a constitutional republic so that we can finally be free from the tyranny of the quote-unquote elected minority. And then we have Ms. Lena White saying, not hearing much in relation to the public education question. There has been no public forum for discussion, no idea of what is happening or the time frame of what is happening, and no talk of public involvement except for the referendum. And then we have a Miss Ann Perkins commenting on Mr. Mukulu's statement that we're being presented with a false choice and saying that a false choice is really not having a choice. And I think one thing that I wanted to clarify, I hope I'm not overstepping by clarifying this, but I think Mr. Mukulu was really trying to push Dr. Spence into saying whether or not the education would detail the differences between a ceremonial versus an executive
quite frankly,
president.
I'm not sure because a bill is going to be presented to Parliament.
Yes.
And I think, and as I said earlier, people have already indicated that if this is what you're presenting to me, then I'm going to be voting no. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that the Governor General, by law, has awesome powers already. And, you know, when we look at it, is that what we want going forward as well as more reserve powers as Mr. Mukulu was outlining for us? So these are the types of discussions that we want. Yes. Because I've heard persons say again, if we're not going to be paying our tax money to somebody to walk and kiss baby and just open Parliament.
Yes, that's certainly not the kind of thing that we need right now.
That's what people have said quite simply.
Yes.
But beyond that, Jade, I'm very concerned about the writing of this TOR because it almost suggests that I'm definitely moving towards this constitutional monarchy, but removing it rather, but focusing more on an assessment of the key issues going forward. So I don't get a sense around electoral reform, what that really means. Again, the separation of powers conversation. But what is even troubling for us as a human rights organization is that assessment and review of the charter. And I'm saying to the government that any review of that charter must be to strengthen and not to take away. Because the language that they use, and I'm sorry I don't have on my glasses to quickly find it, was basically to refine. I don't know what that means.
I believe Nadine read it earlier in the show, but yes.
What does refine mean?
Refine wasn't the only term. There was also to insert desired. The word desired
in
was
keeping,
also there.
and when you look at some of the legislation, like the bail bill and so on, I'm very concerned about where the government may be headed, because I want to say to our listeners, you have civil and political constitutional rights. Jamaica must get to the stage where we have social and economic rights.
Absolutely.
For example, your right to education stops at the primary levels. So in other words, you can't say to the government, you're infringing on my right to education beyond primary school. Anything else is a feel-good thing that they provide to you based on statutory provisions.
Yes.
We want the right to education at tertiary level. We want the right to health. And I think our protected characteristics, our freedom from discrimination needs to be strengthened.
Absolutely.
So any review of the charter, let me say to the government of Jamaica, is not to take away any rights. It must be giving us more so that Jamaica can really be developed. So the language that Dr. Chang used recently, that Mr. Valentine from Camperdown rejected quite well. We don't have failing schools in Jamaica. We have an institutional system that makes schools within inner city communities keep on having students based on classism,
yes,
denial of certain provisions by the state, not having a comprehensive approach. And I think that is what we need more when we talk about constitutional reform.
Absolutely.
Not just a feel good, because I believe in the symbolic side of it, the pride as a Jamaican. But I think we need an entire review, Jade, to give me my social and economic rights and a good electoral reform going forward.
I have to agree with you.
Yeah.
And with that impassioned plea, we're going to have to close out the show. We have a regular winner to our trivia, and I'm telling our producer that if Azasaji wins another trivia question without sending in a comment or call on the show, they will forfeit. Right. But Azasaji, congratulations. We are at the end of the show. This was Let's Talk Justice. We'll be back next week at the same time, 1 p.m. I'm Jade Williams.
And I'm Mikhail Jackson. Thank you so much to the producer and the technical team at Bridge 99.
For justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities, no to unlawful detention and police brutalization, class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
We up, yeah. Free up, yeah.
Calling all bridge builders to the Bridge 99 FM, your global partners for outside broadcasts, connecting you from Jamaica to the world.
Where will we go?
From Kingston to Portmore, downtown, Spanish Town,